Well, big news out of Starkville. Mississippi State hired Brian O'Connor. What does this mean for the program, the fans, and the future of Bulldogs baseball? We're breaking it all down.
You are Locked On Mississippi State, your daily podcast on the Mississippi State Bulldogs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Mississippi State your first listen every single day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team day. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. I'm Jaron, Spor, national college football writer at Athlon Sports. That is Landon McBride. We have an exciting show today as it is official. Brian O'Connor is the new head coach at Mississippi State. Also, we're going to talk about Justin Parker had some interesting comments after the game about the whole hiring process. And then we'll end it with who might follow O'Connor to Starkville. There was already some names in the portal from Virginia. We're going to talk about that. That's coming up a little bit later. But first, it's kind of funny because we were doing the podcast yesterday, and one of the segments was the timeline. And we said it multiple times, we would not be surprised if this thing got announced before this podcast aired. We also wouldn't be surprised if you haven't heard, maybe by Wednesday is kind of when we thought at the latest you would hear it by. Ended up happening as soon as we hit schedule on YouTube for our podcast is when it was officially announced. Yeah, unfortunately, Landon and I, we work other jobs and we get up early for those. So we weren't able to do another one. I did do an initial kind of quick reaction to it, but Landon, kind of what is your reaction? Obviously, this had been kind of like this is definitely happening kind of for a while, but now it's official.
I mean, now that it's official and we can talk about it like it's really happening instead of the whole what if, it's exciting. This is a big hire. I mean, he's a great coach, one of, if not the best that's currently, given his track record, as it has been said about another Brian O'Connor, he's not a buster. He's a very good coach. He's going to be there when you need him. He's I read a couple quotes from some of his ex-players. He talks about how he puts the players first, and not just in terms of he's a player's coach. He puts them first as people. Like he cares about them as people before he cares about them as players. And I always love to hear that as a coach, that yes, they want the on-field success, but they care about the off-the-field success of the individuals as well.
Yeah, Mississippi State put out a little bio on him. He has 917 career wins, 388 losses, 2 ties. That's a 71%. So it's pretty good. Obviously, he won the College World Series in 2015. He's made 7 College World Series appearances, 18 NCAA tournament appearances, and 9 Super Regional appearances. And he was the 5-time ACC Coach of the Year and 3-time National Coach of the Year. And he's had 102 MLB draft picks that he's coached and 31 MLB players developed. So definitely a long resume. And when we were kind of talking about him, we said his resume was immaculate. Like he had the best resume of any of the contenders. But, we had our preference for who they should hire. But we also said this would be a home run hire if they were able to do it. And from kind of just reading around on 3, I want to credit them. They put this out where they talked about kind of why he ended up choosing Mississippi State. And it was stuff we had already mentioned was he just didn't feel like he was getting the backing at Virginia that he was going to get at Mississippi State. And Zach Selman kind of laid out his plan for him. And Brian O'Connor, I guess, this is what on 3 had been self-funding the Virginia program, which is insane to think about. And that will not be the case at Mississippi State.
No, it won't. And you mentioned Selman, and we got to give hats off to him for going out and getting O'Connor. Yeah. He had to nail this O'Connor. He did it. And they say sometimes if you want that career-changing big fish, you got to be willing to just put on your big boy panties and sail out into the deep water to get him. And he reeled in that big fish. And this, the jury's still out on Levy if he hit that higher. But I mean, it's hard to say this isn't a home run like from day one, because even if it doesn't work out, you hired a coach that was not necessarily available, who was one of the best in the game.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I actually put out a poll just kind of getting the feel of the fans 44 people voted as of this podcast. 80% of people were ecstatic. Only 2% of people said they just didn't care either way. But there was the 18% that said, ask me in 5 years. And that's fair. And that's kind of how it has become at Mississippi State. Is I don't care how big your name is or what you did at other schools. What you do here is what matters. And we kind of saw, I kind of compare it to like when LeBron joined the Lakers. There was a lot of Lakers fans that were not like over the heels excited that LeBron joined, and all NBA fans are like, you just got the best player in the game. Like, why aren't you super excited? It's because they don't care what you did anywhere else. It's what you do with the Lakers. That's all they care about. And that's how Mississippi State fans, at least 18% of them, have felt.
Yeah, and it's fair because, we kind of mentioned it before. We'll get into it in future episodes, I'm sure, kind of about like what are some of the red flags that might exist with this hiring? Why could it not work out? But the reasons it will work are so much. Their stack of reasons is so much bigger for why it will work out. I mean, we talk about he's almost self-funding a program and had that kind of success. And you come here where that's not the case. You have the best stadium in college baseball, the most rabid fan base when it comes to college baseball. How is that not going to work out? At least to a reasonable extent. I'm not saying like go ahead and clear off a whole facade to just start hanging banners, but I mean, you're going to be in contention for him every year.
Yeah, and I loved his quote in the press release Mississippi State put out. He said, Mississippi State represents everything I love about college baseball, tradition, passion, and a relentless pursuit of excellence. I've coached against the program and followed it closely for years. The atmosphere at Duddy Noble Field is nationally recognized sport. I'm incredibly honored and grateful for the opportunity to lead a program with this kind of legacy and fan base. Mississippi State has set the standard in college baseball, and I can't wait to get to work, build relationships, and compete for championships in Starkville. That should get you fired up.
Yeah. I mean, I'm fired up. I was pretty fired up last night, despite the fact I was ready to go to bed about the time the news dropped. I was like, here we go. It's time to get rolling. I'm one of those guys that as soon as the season's over, I get ready for the next one. And with this happening literally 3 hours after the season ended.
Which kind of surprised us. We didn't expect it to be we weren't. So I shouldn't say we were surprised because we did say nothing would surprise us. But on the flip side, we thought that maybe they would give this team some time to get over the loss, get back home, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But also in the transfer portal era, you really can't waste any time.
Yeah, you can't. And by doing this, you're kind of getting almost what they did when they fired Lamonis mid-season. You got to jump on being able to kind of quietly interview and talk to all those coaches. By doing this so quickly and with it being done this quickly, it was already technically done before it was announced. Right. So O'Connor is probably working in the back, kind of quietly talking to people who are entering the portal who have or are about to, hey, I'm going to go here. Come with me. So, I mean, he's probably already got a jump on all that, before we even knew he was the head coach.
Yeah, and it sounded like, and we'll kind of talk about it in the Who Might Follow BOC with not just players, but also coaches. It sounded like he had his coaching staff kind of already sorted out before taking the job as well. But from everything that I've heard, and On3 was another one that reported this. They're the main ones that I read that reported this, but there was a couple other sites. He was the guy from the start, and they went all in on him. They interviewed a few candidates, and we'll talk about that in another podcast if they should have interviewed more and things like that. But they kind of identified him early and said, we're going to make him say no. And that's why I'm glad you gave credit to Zach Selman, because he's obviously gotten a lot of flack. A lot of people criticize him for not getting the wins on the fields or the courts or any of the different sports. But he's doing so many good things financially for Mississippi State. This doesn't happen if he doesn't get the backing of the donors enough to say, yeah, we'll go all in on baseball, which, you can argue if that's smart or not. But regardless, it got you one of the top coaches in college baseball, and he's going to be paid like it too, it sounds like. But you have to give him major props, identifying his number one target and getting him.
Yeah, zeroing in on a candidate sometimes is a terrible decision. We see that all the time. frequently in the NFL, we're like, oh, this is going to be our guy. And you just go after him, and either you get him and you pay him too much and it doesn't work out, or you end up not getting him and you miss out on the next 7 best candidates and you're left with a terrible coach. This time it worked out. It worked out as good as it possibly could have. Like I said, you get a guy who not necessarily available. He wasn't out of contract, really. He wasn't like, just sitting on the street waiting for a call. You went, you got him. He has a resume that is as good, if not better, than every other coach in college baseball. And he's coming here. It's a home run hire. And really, last thing to say about that is welcome to the family, O'Connor.
Yeah, welcome to the family, Hell State. But there was one person not so happy by all the rumors and everything going around. We're going to talk about that and what he had to say. That's coming up next.
Ever check your bank account and wonder where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. And that's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. And when I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. We've all been there. It still hits me sometimes. But now I do budget smarter and save more. And with all-in-one convenience, instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan your long-term goals. With easy collaboration, managing your money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year.
Well, thanks for making Locked On Mississippi State your first listen every single day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, so one person not excited about all these coaching rumors was Justin Parker, been the interim head coach. He was asked about just kind of the distraction of the week. These reports started circulating last Wednesday about probably being Brian O'Connor as the head coach. He said, I got kids upset on the bus on Wednesday and Thursday. I got all kinds of stuff flying around. It's just, I credit these guys for just staying focused and locked in. They love each other. They love playing for each other. I wish a lot of the rumors weren't flying around. I wish there was a little bit more patience with the process. Now, having that being said, he did say he understands the business now.
Yeah, and I understand where he's coming from, but also I don't. Because, yeah, you worry. It's the whole thing. You don't want it to go around and affect your team and all that. But when it's coming from the head coach who's an interim who is not coming back, it seems a lot more like sour grapes and mad. He found, I'm sure he knew he wasn't going to be the next head coach before this, but, officially was told he was losing his job essentially from social media. And it's hard not to take it that way when he says something like that. But I understand the sentiment of you not wanting it to affect the players and how they're dealing with some of them, what could be the last games they really play of baseball. I'm sure some of them will go into minors, but some of these guys might not continue. It could be their last game, and it's all clouded by all this coaching rumor stuff.
Yeah, and my kind of pushback on that is they knew when Lemonis was fired that this was going that way. Like, this wasn't something that just came out of nowhere. Like, if it was one of those things like Lemonis was still hired and you're like, oh, he's probably gone and this is going to be his replacement and all this stuff, then I'm with you. That's a distraction, and that's a big distraction. But it didn't seem to bother me. You went and made it to the regional finals. You beat everyone but Florida State, who was the host. Like, it didn't seem like a big deal that way. Right. But I'm just not on board with this was this major distraction, because you knew as soon as your season's over, the next coach is being named likely. Like, You can't tell me that you didn't know that, one. And two, you can't tell me that you thought you were the front runner, no matter how well you had been doing.
Right. I mean, these same names have been floating around since, 2 days after Lamonis was fired? Like, these names have been, was it a distraction when you went, 9-1 to end the season? Was it a distraction then? I don't think it was. So, again, I understand a little bit of it just from the aspect of it's the end of the season and the rumors got so much louder that it was probably a little harder to ignore it just from it was everywhere standpoint, but it shouldn't have been a big deal. Like I said, coming from him, it seems like more of like the sour grapes thing. Now, if these were players giving these comments, like, yeah, it was so like everyone was just trying to talk to us about it. It was coming left and right, reporters, fans, everything. Then I would take a little more credence to these complaints.
Yeah, and I mean, it sounds like the players were informed on the bus right before the game on Sunday. And so maybe if you want to say that was a distraction, but they came out the first 7 innings winning the game. So it wasn't like they didn't seem distracted. they were playing really well in that game. Right.
And the second one.
Yeah, and so they were in that game and able to win it. And so I don't know if I buy the whole distraction thing. I mean, it's always, I want to say, instead of saying I don't buy it, it's always been a distraction, but it's something you've dealt with for a month. Like, it's not out of the blue. You didn't know this was coming. Oh, you're surprised. Like, you knew this was coming. Brian O'Connor was the number one name, like you mentioned, from the start. Like, you knew this was on the way. And apparently, and I didn't see it, but apparently a Virginia media source story leaked that Brian O'Connor had taken the job, and that was right before the game. And so that's when Mississippi State officials had to tell the players, like, yes, this is actually happening. And so all that stuff went down. But I'm not buying it. But with all that being said, like I said yesterday in my top dog, hats off to what Justin Parker was able to do when he took over and the job that he did rounding this team around into form and getting him into the regional and getting him to a regional final.
Yes.
Now Brian O'Connor's going to have a lot of work because Landon and I, we were kind of going through the roster because you kind of knew you were losing quite a bit, but we didn't realize how many guys you're losing. You're losing several. Now, we're going to talk here in a second. There might be several on their way as well to you, so that would be a positive.
Right.
But, I mean, it's one of those things that I love when this kind of stuff happens because it gets you fired up, but I hate it because I know I have to wait a year until it's back around. And so the anticipation is going to kill me.
Yeah, it's something you just said kind of, I guess, made me realize where I can relate more with Justin Parker's comments. If he said something more about like he doesn't like how the team found out, like if that had been his complaint,
that's fair.
That is completely fair. If he thinks that the university should have handled the announcement to the team a little bit differently, totally agree. You should not find out on a bus before you play a game that.
Which it sounds like that wasn't the team's plan. It got leaked by Virginia media, and they had to do something.
Exactly. So if that was how it found out, and that's his complaint, then that's fair. But
that's fair.
The whole it being a distraction thing is just you're trying to come up with something to say.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree completely. All right, let's get into who might follow BOC to Starkville. It's a couple star players. One of them might forego going to the MLB draft to stay and possibly follow O'Connor to Starkville. We'll talk about that. That's coming next. All right, well, thanks for making Locked On Mississippi State your first listen every single day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, so anytime there's a coaching change in any sport, not just baseball, just any sport, there's players that usually enter the portal. Sometimes they follow that coach. Sometimes they are leaving that school that new coach is coming to. So all this stuff, just there's a lot of change that happens.
A lot of moving pieces.
As of the recording of this podcast, kind of like we talked about yesterday, I have not seen a Mississippi State player enter yet, but I would expect some too. So I just want to preface that.
I did see something even before the regional started that I can't remember the names. I'd have to go back and find it. That 2 freshmen are planning to enter the portal. Now, does O'Connor's hiring change their minds? We'll see, but I haven't seen that they officially have yet.
Yeah. Okay. So that's, again, by the time this transfer portal is so quick, by the time we record this post, there might be some in there. As of now, there aren't, but we expect there to be some. So
Yes.
just want to lay that out there. As for Virginia players that have entered that are possibly going to follow O'Connor to Mississippi State, Henry Ford, he's an infielder, standout infielder. He's one of the top available transfers. He entered the portal. He had a 362 batting average, 11 home runs, 56 RBIs. If he decides not to go to the MLB draft, the Bulldogs are well positioned to land him, but they're going to have stiff competition because Tennessee and A&M want him as well. Also, the other big fish is left-hander Tomas. I think it's Tomas because of where he's from. Valencias. He had a record of 6-1 with 70 strikeouts. He did have a 4.59 ERA, but he was a freshman this last year, and he was a weekend starter. But he entered the portal with a do not contact tag. That means that no other schools can contact him unless he contacts them first, which usually means they know where they're going. And so he's kind of trending to go to Mississippi State. And his brother, who was a first baseman at Illinois, Vitus, I believe it pronounces his name, he also entered. So those two could be coming. And then there's two other ones that entered with do not contact tags from Virginia, Chone James and James Nunnally. James finished with a 373 average, and Nunnally finished with a 296 with a 407 on base percentage. Both of them are well positioned to follow Brian O'Connor. Also, Chris Arroyo, who came from Florida, transferred to Virginia, played well at Virginia. He also entered, and he possibly might be coming to Mississippi State as well. So a lot of names.
And Henry Ford's the big one.
Yes.
Preseason, I believe he was probably projected top 20 pick. He still had a very good season, but it wasn't as good as his previous years.
Yeah.
So, and I checked some rankings earlier today, and I believe he was around 36. So he's on that fringe first rounder. And so I could see him foregoing the MLB draft and being like, look, if I go back for another year and put up numbers more like what I had before this past year, I could be a top 10 pick. So I could very, reasonably see him staying. That one, It wouldn't surprise me that much. It's not like you're trying to talk a top 10 pick into transferring and staying.
Right.
It's a guy who has a little bit to prove, even though he is a very good player. The Valencias brothers it's an interesting duo.
Yeah.
And also, we're bringing in a lot of first basemen. That's kind of what I've seen. At least Henry Ford can play some outfield.
Yes.
And with Noah Sullivan most likely going, I think I saw somewhere that he might have. He's one of those guys who maybe has another year, but most likely not. You're gonna need someone to DH some. So there's a spot for one of those guys. There's a lot of holes. Really, the only player that you're like, we have to have him back is Ace Reese. That's the linchpin. If you get him back, if you put him and Henry Ford in the middle of the lineup, that's terrifying for other teams.
Yeah, and I want to put out that from what we've heard, and not saying like we have some great inside sources, but it sounds like Reese is going to do what every player should do, which is weigh your options.
Yeah.
Do you want to play for this new coach? Do you not want to play for this new coach? What do you want? What do you want to do? And that sounds like he's having those conversations. And so we'll see if he ends up entering the portal. If he does, that's a massive loss. Landon and I talked about it. He's the one you have to circle to make sure he stays. Whoever took over had to make sure Ace Reese came back. And so we'll see what happens there. Also, it sounds like, I believe it was confirmed, pretty much all of his staff is coming with him, Brian O'Connor. McMullen, who's been his longtime assistant, is staying. That was big. I think the only one that wasn't coming was the pitching coach, I believe, is the only one that isn't coming with Brian O'Connor. Even like their recruiting guys are coming and admin guys. Some of them are coming. Corey Mascara, who is the pitching coach at Wake Forest, is the one that is expected to follow Brian O'Connor, which we kind of talked about that on yesterday's podcast. They obviously were still playing on Monday, so I think that's why it's not been officially announced with him. But yeah, it sounds like his full staff staying with him, and then obviously add Mascara as the pitching coach.
Yeah, and McMillan, that's the guy who, if you go back to when we first broke down O'Connor's candidacy, I was kind of like, he may come, he may not. He was someone I thought might stay and actually take over for O'Connor as the head coach of Virginia. But if he's coming, that's huge because they were hired the same year. They built the Virginia program from the ground up.
Yeah.
So having the two of them together is huge. And my admiration of Wake Forest's pitching lab is well documented on here. So getting that pitching coach, if he actually does come, that would be a massive get with all of these issues you've had with pitchers this year, how shallow this, you had no depth on the staff. That with someone like Valencias, I mean, huge strikeout numbers, 70 strikeouts in 61 innings. Those are massive strikeout numbers. Getting a guy shapes and pitches a little bit differently, that's a guy you can rely on. So,
and the way Evan was pitching at the end of the year, and you love Ryan McPherson's potential, like you have some guys that you possibly could go with going forward, but we'll see what ends up happening. But a lot of good news coming right here in Starkville, for sure. But all right, well, thanks for making Locked On Mississippi State your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Portal Show. Brian Smith has the latest rumors, portal entries, and signings. Be the most informed fan on the rapid changes to the college football landscape. Find the Portal on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Real quick, if you were tuning in because you're wanting to listen to some football news, because we did tease that we were going to talk recruiting on today's podcast, because of the Brian O'Connor news, we have to push that back. We're actually going to talk about that in detail on Friday because Mississippi State did get 2 commitments, so we'll talk about that on Friday. Tomorrow's episode, we've talked about a lot of the positives.
Mm-hmm.
We do want to talk about the negatives because you have to at least tell both sides. Like, this is why we think it's a great hire, and overall we think it's a great hire. Mm-hmm. But these are some of the red flags that might pop up as to why O'Connor may not work out. We're going to talk about that on tomorrow's podcast, so definitely check that out. Follow us on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter. Check out my work on Athlon Sports. That's Landon, and until next time, Hail State.
Hail State.